Perfect. Okay, so welcome everyone to today's seminar hosted by Berkeley Pharma Tech Foundation. My name is Tiffany Terry. Our mission is to increase access for scientists and entrepreneurs in biotech through education, mentorship, and professional opportunities. Through our speaker series, industry leaders share insights on cutting-edge biotech innovation, career development, and entrepreneurship. Our goal is to foster a community where scientists and builders learn from real experiences and grow together. To get involved, please follow us on LinkedIn. Stay tuned for upcoming seminars and conferences, and feel free to reach out to Van Loen, the president of the foundation, to explore more ways to engage with our mission. Today, we are thrilled to welcome our speaker, Nataliia Karpenko. Nataliia is a healthcare innovation and product strategy leader with experience spanning medtech, AI, and enterprise technology. She has led cross-functional teams and product initiatives at organizations including Medtronic, Meta, and Synopsys. She's passionate about patient-centered innovation, and she focuses on building scalable solutions, driving market adoption, and advancing the future of healthcare through technology, strategy, and collaboration. Please join me in welcoming Nataliia.
Tiffany, thank you so much. I really appreciated the introduction and really appreciate it for inviting me to speak about a very important topic. How does the science get commercialized and gets in hands of people who want to use it? So before we dive into the presentation and agenda, I want to appreciate everyone who took a time and responded to the survey. The surveys that we have provided allow us to better understand your background, the questions you have, and specifically your familiarity with product marketing, product marketing management, product management, and just making sure we're hitting those points and those questions that are really valuable to you. So with a couple stats, we are somewhere within responders that half of the responders are coming from the investor venture capital, and also a little less than half are the entrepreneurs. We also have the industry professionals joining us today. And when it comes to the familiarity with product marketing management and product management, 42% of responders are curious. They have heard about this term, but want to make sure they understand better. And then we have a next following cohort of 29%, someone familiar and just want to define and learn more about this role. And the final, when it comes to the main reasons of why the responders were interested in today's topic, 57% said they're looking to apply products thinking on my own work, research, or startup. So with that, I want to kick off the presentation. And I just want to be very cognizant that this is meant to be a conversation, not only a lecture. So please make sure, raise your hand. Tiffany will try to help to will be moderating today's session, and she will help to stop me in case I get very passionate about certain topic. So let's start. Today we're going to talk about something that I've seen trip brilliant scientists, talented engineers, and well-founded founders alike. The gap between having a breakthrough science and actually getting into the hands of people who need it. Before I start, I want you to take a moment and imagine a product. It's a clinically superior. It has 3 patents, FDA clearance, and it's published in New England Journal of Medicine. However, in 5 years, it's only the footnotes. Meanwhile, less impressive competitors own the market. So that's why today I want to talk about what happens and how to make sure it doesn't happen to you, to your product, to your idea, to your startup. Here's the awakening truth about the healthcare startups. Roughly 90% of healthcare startups fail, and 42% of Series A digital health startups shut down or pivot in the first 3 years. In average, time from FDA clearance to the meaningful commercialization to the revenue, it takes 3 to 7 years. And I think this is something that many startups founders do not realize, as well as product managers. And we'll dive deep on this specific last point, what it really takes to commercialize the products. And and very often when companies fail and product fails, it's not because of science. It's very often the commercialization strategy fails. So that's why my goal was to build this presentation and treat it more as a playbook designed for product marketing managers, for product managers, as well as founders who want to make sure they build what market is actually willing to buy, not just what can be produced in the lab. So let's take a look how we're going to spend our time together. And the introduction, Tiffany has already introduced me, so I will be very brief on my own introduction, but just want to make sure you know where I'm coming from. And the main part will be the product marketing playbook. And there is a bonus part. If we have time, we may dive into the big picture framework for the commercialization. And of course, the Q&A. I want to make sure Q&A is the most important part of today's conversation. And you may have a questions or even reflection, some thoughts or experiences you want to share based on the points I'm presenting. Please raise your hand and we can learn together. Let's dive in and speak a little bit more about my professional background. As Tiffany has mentioned, I work in medtech, digital health, and AI space for the last 10 years. And I've launched products at enterprise companies as well as startups. In my career, I also advised many startups in the past in a different capacity. And recently, I also started the angel investment, which has been such a great joy being in the past a startup founder who had the challenges to be funded, to see how I can actually become angel investor and empower startups in that way. When it comes to the skills that really matter, in my experience, to be a productive product marketing manager as well as a founder, the strategic communication stands out the most when it comes to way how you can engage with your team, how you can make sure that your stakeholders align, and you're very clear explaining why behind every decision you make. The second skill set I think is really important. You are the most passionate and the most knowledgeable person about your customer and the problem. And being the customer obsessed is really comes to well understanding the customer pain points. We're not only talking about the data and reports, but really understanding and well understanding the workflow that customer facing and other stakeholders, and being very articulate and good educator to your entire team about those pain points that you'll be addressing. Also, the other side of the coin of customer knowledge and market is really come with data fluency and making sure you build the right metrics and you have the evidence that helps to support your decisions. And you want to bring this data back to the team. You want to back every decisions with aspects of knowing qualitative and quantitative data. And the last but not least, ruthless prioritization. And I have to admit, in my previous days of a career in a startup especially, it was a very challenging part, how to prioritize and how to kill features early. But that is something that allows you to be really good at fewer things versus trying to be great at more of them. I see Christine approving this one. So I'm sure all of us, any thoughts?
I'm just remembering the adage, better to do a few things with excellence than many things with mediocrity. So what I'm trying to live by.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, so let's dive into the next part. I think this is something I wanted to talk about things a bit differently. So having a great experience working in tech, health tech, I think the biggest part I want to admit that I've done so many mistakes in my career, and many of my mistakes are just bring us closer to the success. So I decided to take time to reflect this weekend and outline all the mistakes I made as a product marketing manager and things that I think that they're gonna allow you to build a better products if you reflect on them and make sure you capture those lessons learned. So when it comes to mistakes I've done, I broke them into three different clusters. One is mistakes related to the customers. The second cluster is really looking about mistakes I made about understanding and managing the market. And the last one is about discipline. So let's take a look at the first cluster of the wrong customer. So sometimes in my past career, we built the products for the loudest customer, someone who shared those feedback, and we didn't per se fully understand which customer segment we prioritizing and really focusing on that loudest voice misled us to building feature for them. The big part of underestimating market. I still see this mistake very common. A lot of startups address total addressable market without fully understanding the attainable market and really doing necessary due diligence, really understanding what is that attainable market and how much customer is going to pay and how it's going to play on the units economy in terms of ROI. Another mistake also happens very frequent in startups and enterprises doing this work related to ignoring willingness to pay, how much customers going to pay and how frequent. And those kind of complete my first cluster on the customers. The second part, I think, is really understanding that market and being very clear which problem you're solving. What we spoke before, not solving too many problems, really being articulate and clear. If you cannot state the problem in one sentence, you probably don't clearly have it. You need to spend more work defining. And underestimating behavior change. Very often there is expectation that the adoption is a product launch. However, the biggest part, when the product is launched, the adoption and sustained use of the product is only starting. So really better defining the entire behavior change that happened before product launch, during, and afterwards. And sometimes with the science and tech forward startups, sometimes falling in love with the technology, especially speaking about AI or any cool new tools the team would like to adopt, really making sure we are always focusing on the problem, not the favorite solution we want to test. And the final cluster is really about that discipline. It requires a lot of discipline and rigor to make sure you follow the process and you build a strong commercialization strategy. And that's why making sure you know what metrics you are tracking. And very often we can see that engagement is a very common metrics that however get tracked. However, the retention, the revenue, the referral might be a better metrics that has to be optimized for. And also skipping go-to-market strategy, positioning, pricing, and sometimes for the smaller companies and startups, it seems like a lot of work that might be they can do afterwards. However, this is a part of the product, build its sales enablement before your product launch. And last but not least, I think it's all about that prioritization and killing more features that you ship. Because ultimately, and having enough data to back it up. So this is a part of my reflection. And from here on, I want to kick off to the product marketing manager playbook. But before we do so, maybe some of you have any questions or clarifications. Okay, great. Seems everyone is ready to learn more. So when it comes to, so if the science is not enough, when we're talking about that, the best technology in the room rarely win. So what is really helps to move the needle? So let's start with the most expensive myth in healthcare. Here is the belief I want to challenge. In the lab, the best technology wins. In the market, the most adapted technology wins. So there are completely different games. The most founders who still playing in the first when it comes to the science optimized companies and products that really prioritize accuracy, novelty, technical performance, those face a number of challenges, especially when they enter the market, when they're looking for the scalability, usability, and also that unit economy and trust. So two examples I thought would demonstrate really well as a use case to support this point is a Google Glasses on one side and Intuitive Surgical. So when we're looking at the Intuitive, Google Glasses, this product was launched in 2014, and initially the product itself promised impressive experience, and many early adopters, especially at the facilities like UCSF, Stanford, adopted this product. However, this product hasn't been built for the workflow in the hospitals. And what really failed was that trust aspect, because patients didn't feel safe to be videotaped. And over the time, lack of that workflow understanding and adoption, as well as that lack of trust, is really what didn't allow this product successfully being used in the market. When it comes to the Intuitive Surgicals, they have a very different path. They received clearance in 2000 actually, and currently they dominate in the soft tissue robotic surgery. They won because they certainly didn't have initially a major adoption among clinicians, because there was a major concern whether they have any superior outcomes of their procedure. However, over time, the surgical robotics has been really following the true workflow of the hospitals and really addressing all the needs when it comes to the scalability, usability, and really adapting to the needs of the clinician that really allow them to hold the market and win significantly. I believe their revenue currently consists around $10 billion a year. So when it comes to where do we start? When we're looking at the solution, we actually start at the problem level. So if technology, many of you have heard probably that we build this amazing technology and we have just the need to find the right user. And this sentence has burned so many capital in healthcare, more than any FDA rejection, since there is a big part not really fully understanding the problem in the market. So I want us to take a look at a few things we need to consider when we're trying to understand the problem. The first one, understanding who is your customer, who really feels the pain, and who is that person. Is it an end user? Is it the buyer? Or there are multi-stakeholders when it comes to your user? The next one, also trying to understand the frequency. How often it hurts? Is it going to be the solution that will be used daily, or is it going to be used rarely? How much does it cost for your customers? Is it specifically translates to the revenue loss, dollar amount, time, or actually threat to life or trust? And then being very clear, who pays to solve it? Especially in healthcare, we know that very frequently the buyer isn't the customer, isn't the user. So being very clear, understanding who will be paying for this and how much. And is the pain is urgent? I think this one is very important to understand, because very often it's a good to have solution. We call it maybe a vitamin test versus really having that aspirin solution that addresses the most urgent need. And the good use case here could be represented by the two major companies in the market. One of them, Theranos, that many of us know that they have built the they had the vision and the revolutionary promise, but not really having a real clinical evidence, and the company has dissolved within a few years after the launch. However, Dexcom, initially the company was really looking into better understanding the customer need and understanding what the patient with the diabetes type 1 facing on a daily basis, and building based on the patient workflow and patient needs, adding all the additional solutions that allows patient to rely on their solution to manage their diabetes. Over time, Dexcom became a #1 company, and currently their annual revenue over $4 billion. What is the most important? They are preventing 50% of ER visits for the patient who are facing a higher spikes of glucose. So truly life impacting solution, but it really makes a difference when the solution is really built around the problem versus having a big vision and then finding the problem. When it comes to the real customers, really understanding the stakeholders, you need to be influencing in healthcare when you're building those products. So the customer in tech is very often we might consider that the same customer will be the same user will be paying for the product. But let's say if you sell into the large healthcare system or insurance, you need to consider every stakeholder. And in enterprise healthcare, very often, on average, based on the Rock Health report, it takes 6.8, almost 7 stakeholders that you need to have their buy-in and their alignment to be able to sell to them. And the sales cycle is long, 12 to 24 months for a single account. So you need to have a significant amount of capital as well as timeline to be able to convert these customers. When you sell into the customers, you really need to understand what value you bring to each customer, and you need to build to that value. When we're looking at the physician, they will be very much focused on the outcomes, autonomy. And sometimes we may underestimate nurses who really follow the workflow and have a lot of workload, but they might be one of the best champions in your solution. You just need to really define the true value, the true problem the customer have, and how do you communicate that value and bring the value with your solution. Very often comes to the hospital procurement and or ASC's procurement, or and it's very important to understand how do you convey ROI and how can you address the safety and risk and liability, as well as especially in the healthcare. And of course, the most important, what does a customer experience looks like and how do you build that trust? So that's why it's important to think about that budget timeline, but also the proper KPIs, how you're going to be assessing the product and making sure it meets the customer needs. Are there any questions? I know there is a lot of information and wondering if you have any additional thoughts on this.
Perhaps just an explanation of the acronym KPI in this context.
Yeah, a key performance indicator. Just that metric. Yeah, that is a key metrics. Okay. But that's a good one. Yeah, and like maybe I try to use less acronyms, but it's so hard. It just makes it easy to add them to your presentation. So let's think about also disruption. When it comes to the healthcare, the disrupting the workflow may cause you losing the business or not being able to deliver to your customer needs. Yeah, it's very different. Sorry, go ahead. No. Great. So so when it comes to also change of the workflow, as we reviewed in a previous slide, every stakeholder have their workflow, and they any additional action, any additional requirements for them to change their behavior and learn something new, just going to complicate their workflow. So you really need to think about every stakeholder you'll be influencing who will be using your product, how you will simplify and make their life better, not more complex. And I think this is a big part then when startups are building separate dashboard and separate solution, maybe outside of electronic health, electronic medical record, and assuming that medical staff, clinical team would have the time to do so. So think more about how do you simplify their workflow and do not cause the workflow disruption. That would be your most effective way to get an early product adoption, especially when you're in the early phases of your product technology. So let's take a look at the few adoption killers when it comes to adding additional clicks, additional steps in the documentation that has to be submitted by the clinical team. Require additional training. So if you will require additional training, you need to really think throughout how you're going to perform this training and understand where in the current flow workflow for the clinical staff, you would provide that training and how this information will be retained and whether the physicians and clinical team need to be retrained, because it might be not enough to do an initial training at the lunchtime of the product. Slow down anything that would slow down the clinician, making them to double guess, to check on multiple sources before they make decision besides all the solutions they're already currently using in their workflow. The fourth one is really what it breaks a handoff because of how healthcare works currently, what their workflow or patient flow, let's say, through the hospital. And if you will be changing something in this disruption, you need to be very cautious and need to really understand why they would need to do so and what would be their motivation for this. And when it creates additional liability exposure, let's say adopting the new AI solution that provides certain analysis and diagnosis, just being very clear what type of liability and who will be responsible for this is also very important to understand. And I think it's a good example probably from Paradox that if you ask a physician about Epic and health record, and majority of them, they say they just hate it because it takes so much time to really input all the information, and it's just not as intuitive as they want to. However, Epic company, it was held privately for a very long time, and they have been really following the workflows. They well understood where the need of a health record is required, and they fully adapted and built a solution that really met the clinician needs and compliance needs. So this product is so widely adopted. There are so many companies entered the market in the last 15 years who try to compete with Epic. However, their thorough commercialization strategy, the roadmap, is really helped them to hold the ground really well in this specific product category. When it comes to the regulatory and meeting commercialization. So something I shared at the beginning that for many founders, the FDA approval, it seems like a very exciting milestone that now every potential customers is ready to buy. However, the reality looks very different. It's only the starting point. When it comes to the FDA clearance, the customers really don't buy the clearance. They buy reimbursements, they buy the champion products, and buy the supported products. And a lot of things has to happen in parallel when you pursuing the clearance for your product. Things that you need to figure out, specifically the CPT codes that will be built, and how the coverage decisions would be made specifically for your product. What is really important to find is a clinical champion. Someone who will be advocating for your products with the hospital, ASC, so any other customer side, and really helping you to better define that path and necessary evidence when it comes to this product. Sorry, then certainly thinking about that implementation, something we touched in a previous slide, speaking about the training and integration. How this product will be integrated in the current IT system, but also how it will be integrated in the current workflow. Understanding very well the procurement, how your customer making their purchasing decisions, how their current contracts look like, are their current contracts do have any limitation and ability to purchase a new products based on the current vendors they work with. Understanding them GPO, group purchasing organization structures they have, and understanding why the decisions are made at their local hospital or facility level, whether it's a group level, and well understanding how their value analysis is performed. Also looking about how the sales engine gonna work. Are you gonna have reps who are gonna help to sell these products? Do you have distribution? And how do you build additional tools like ROI calculators, savings calculators that allows your customers to really understand how they are benefiting from your product? A couple of things to bring in examples for specifically regulatory meet commercialization. Currently at FDA clearance, there are something around like 950 FDA clearances to AI and machine learning devices, majority of them in like in diagnostic space, in radiology. However, only few than 20% establish the CMS reimbursements, and really understanding, and this represents a significant challenge, how these products could be paid for and who will pay for them. When it comes to a good product to demonstrate that really built upon all of the 6 different milestones of the commercialization and a regulatory and following the regulatory pathway is the iRhythm technology. They built the patch, the Zio patch for the cardiac monitoring. And they've done a lot of this work in parallel, really building the clinical evidence, defines the reimbursements, providing the service that truly work to support the clinical and patient team. And the company went IPO, and they have a really large market adoption for this product. So I will pause here in case you have any questions, any clarifications.
Hi, Nataliia. I actually had a quick question. Can you talk a little bit more about on your last slide when you said that hospitals buy reimbursement? What does that really mean?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when it comes to hospitals, how they able to pay to the customer, how they let's start with the hospitals, how they make their revenue to be able to sustain their business. So many hospitals, they may get the grants, but majority of hospitals, they need to file the CPT codes. They do, that's a common practice. They file the CPT codes. That's how they get paid for their different procedures, surgeries. And that's why when the hospital is really evaluating a new vendor, they need to decide whether they're going to be, is there existing CPT code that would cover the expenses for the specific service or product, or are there additional costs that comes with the specific vendor fees? And in this case, there are different ways for the pricing strategies, that some products may be fully covered by the CPT codes, or there are some products may help to enable certain CPT codes for the hospitals. And there are actually a number of innovative startups that are really helping for hospital utilize more CPT codes billing, especially for patients' remote monitoring and management. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
I had a similar question about where the clinical champion comes in here. And I don't know, perhaps you could give an example of how they might have blocked something like this AI machine learning project versus, iRhythm technology, where would they come into play and making sure like this gets a pass or doesn't? I think that would be helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the most crucial steps in finding those clinical champions. And I think a lot of things also start with that well understanding the problem, really understanding what problem you're solving for whom, and making sure when you're building your champions is someone who's also passionate about the same problem and someone who's facing this problem on a daily basis. So it could be maybe if it's for patients monitoring the nurses that might be facing too many false alarms that coming up by the patient bedside in ICU, and they're really looking for better accuracy. And really, whether it's a ML system or whether it's maybe more a device, is really clearly understanding what is the true problem. And the true problem may be not the lack of ML or AI, but it's really the problem is like too many false alarms, ability to really prioritize patients' need first and being able to deliver better accuracy for the patients' monitoring. So I think that's important on one way to really working with engaging the champions who truly facing this problem and truly they believe that something has to change. When it comes to, let's say, surgical devices, very often working maybe with the surgeons or residents programs and finding some of the solutions and ability maybe to save time or provide additional accuracy or tools that maybe the surgeons will be open to adopting because they see a problem in the market, and they also the ones who will be your best advocates, and they the one who even help you to better define your problem statement. So I think that's how we will go about clinical champions. When it comes further down, when your product is already launched and you're just looking to scale, I think then you might be looking a bit differently into this. You might be specifically looking to scale and working with the supply chain and procurement if you're offering cost savings. So it depends which stakeholders you engage, but I think in a very early phases, I would go as close to the problem and someone who's very passionate about that problem to be your champion. Great questions. Thank you so much. So when it comes to the market readiness, I think this one is also very common to underestimate because for many science-forward companies and startups, very often thinking about that that disruption is really an ability to build a new next unicorn. And when you as a founder or product leader, you're really looking to bring the new technology, change the market, and change behaviors, you're taking a huge responsibility. And ultimately, you're not really building the product, you're building more like an option of the future. So it's very important to understand it's very hard for one single company to change everything at once. So I would emphasize that it's very important to think about the timing and maybe focusing at least on one or two significant aspects that you're looking to improve, whether it's technology itself, whether it's market timing, or specifically maybe bringing that behavior change aspect to it. The good example by telemedicine. Many of us have heard about telemedicine existing in early 20s, and with the Skype technology and any other services, we haven't broadly adopted this technology, even when it matured in 2010. And even the months before my major pandemic, COVID, the adoption of the telehealth still was slogged by the behavior change was not there. And we had something under 1.1% of all medical visits with primary care were done through the telemedicine. However, just within a couple of months, there was a major change, and it was a forced change. And that change basically drove the product adoption to 32.5% of all the visits went through the telemedicine. However, when the time passed by, we can see that adoption, maybe a trend or that forced shift has stabilized, and the new maintained state is really more around 10% that became more stable. So I can see that with a lot of technologies and a lot of market readiness, to thinking sometimes that if it will be such a major change, it may take a very significant timeline. Here we're demonstrating at least like quarter of a century, 24 years, what it takes for this type of technology to be adopted and really have that behavior change.
So Nataliia, we have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hi, Nataliia. Thank you so much for taking us through this. It's been super insightful. You might have touched upon it briefly, but I wanted to ask, how much of a disadvantage is it raising early on FDA clearance? The reason I ask is, in my experience, it's often almost sometimes easier to get the clearance than to actually have these reimbursement pathways and actually have true traction. So if you do raise too early, apart from sort of valuation, what is the disadvantage to the founder? Maybe it's bad for investors, but how do you navigate that? Because it's an issue we're also facing Tribal.
Yeah, Manoj, that's a really great question, and I'll try to address it. Maybe someone else in the audience also have some thoughts on this. Would love to hear. I think the biggest part is really thinking about how much about your timeline. How long is it gonna take you to take project from the idea, take it through the clearance to the commercialization, and really timing like your fundraising, how much money you need, and really accounting probably for the longer run rate versus shorter. Meaning that if initially fundraising only for the FDA clearance, but not working on commercialization in parallel, that's something that extends the timeline of commercialization for the multiple years. So it's more just cautionary tale, specifically how to be more realistic when you're fundraising and understanding how to reach each of the milestones. I think getting clearance is an incredible milestone, and it's must for many products. So it's not one or another. I think it's more just being more proactive and working on many of these activities in parallel, working your reimbursement strategy even prior FDA clearance, and being able to think about all these other milestones as an essential part of your commercialization. So I wouldn't say it's really limited to just timing things around FDA clearance.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a good question.
We have another question from Priyanka.
Yeah. Hi. Really great talk. I have a quick question. For software as a medical device, when you're using SMD as a product, if you want to understand whether it's something which hospitals would want or not, what we are making, who should be a point of contact?
Yeah, Priyanka, that's a good one. Are you the one also submitted this question in the survey? You
Yes.
did, yeah? Okay, let me go. I think I worked a little bit on like initial slide for that. So just want to make sure we can address it a little. So like have a little bit more information here. So I think as a big part, I think you were asking specifically on monetization strategy, and another one, the collaboration with the hospital and clinicians. So when it comes, I think the second part you were addressing currently is really how to build that trust, and whether you're working with the IT department, and how do you work with the integration, and having more experience to understand their current infrastructure when it comes to which, whether they use Epic, Athena Health, or any other different EHR, EMR records they have, and have access to the sandbox and ability to test your solution in a safe environment. I think it's something that I would highly recommend working with their value-based analysis team, their procurement team, and giving you that access. It's also depending on which hospitals do you approach, because there are teaching hospitals and hospitals that are used to adopting new technologies, and they have a processes, and they have much more experience doing so. So if it's a Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, hospitals versus it's a local community hospital down the street. So I think it's very important also realizing that sometimes it might be easier to have a conversation with some of this hospital potential customers, but they don't have necessary infrastructure and experience. And one of the best ways sometimes to build a solution with the teams that have some experience and wouldn't take all that effort from your team educating them about the basics of integration. But I think the biggest part is also when it comes to the stakeholder analysis, and really seeing whom this technology would impact, not per se who fully would utilize it, but what are the outcomes of this software as a medical device would be impacting, and what will be their thoughts and concerns and addressing them. Because as I shared in the previous slide, it takes a stakeholder alignment to really receive the approvals.
Thank you. Thank you. That answers all my questions. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Okay, sorry, just half of the presentation. So I will go back. I know we covered a lot today. There's a lot of information. I'll be happy to share the slide, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. So just to complete today's conversation, I think I want to share two more points. One, when it comes to your product, especially if you're working on AI products, how do you build trust, and how you make sure that you understand how your customers and all the stakeholders would be evaluating your product. When it comes to can they trust this product, and who will be liable? Very often when the healthcare system or physician will be adopting your products, there are a lot of things that comes to the liability, and making sure you understand, address those concerns and build upon their main concerns on this. And also understanding that the workflow how these products would be integrated in the current workflow, and how they can better understand the outputs and track the accuracy of the outputs. Some of the good example was demonstrated also with the Epic septic model when they deployed this across US, and in the lab test, the sensitivity was 33%, but it created a major problem at the bedside because it's created around 109 false alarms per every septic case, which certainly didn't meet the clinical performance really hasn't been met based on the algorithmic performance promise. And maybe something to conclude, I think the biggest part when we're looking at the healthcare innovations, it's an opportunity for the translational founders to be able to bring the best science, but also think about their commercialization strategy, and understanding that's really future belong to the innovators who understand how to build scalable, useful products that are trusted, and they understand the also economical outcomes of these products. So before you build another feature, if you're a product marketing manager or a founder, think about, again, about the real problems you're solving and to whom, and think about those multi-stakeholders approach. Also, who truly will be benefiting, and truly understand what type of benefits they will be expecting and at which level, type of those KPIs, key product indicators and metrics, how these products will be impacting those users. And why the system, why would the system, the hospital system, why this company would adopt this, and what would require for them to be changed to use your product, what things you might be replacing for them, whether you might be saving some time or generating additional revenues as CPT codes. You really need to be very clear and articulate about your value proposition. And when it comes to them, additional barriers your customers facing, sometimes it's very important to immerse yourself in a clinical environment, to spend more time actually with your clinical champions in a hospital or in that specific environment where you're interacting with your customers daily, to really understand whether your science and innovations are really solving their true problems. So I will start here, and I will be happy to dive in and answer any questions you may have.
Nataliia, that was incredibly insightful. Thank you so much. Oh, Ben Lowen has a question. Go ahead.
Hi, Nataliia. Thank you for the presentation. I really learned a lot today, and it was very informative. On the first slide, I think you said like there's 1, 2, 3. Number 3 was ruthless prioritization. Can you expand upon that a little bit? And if you have a use case to share with us, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's, as you remember, it was one of my favorite and the ones that I certainly have a lot of experience with. So I think as we spoke that we can be great at many things, and developing fewer feature and focusing on fewer problems is really something that allows us to focus our time, priorities, time to market on the features that matter, and learning how to say no to the features. In my previous experience, when it came to in startup days, we were building a solution, and we had an exciting feature that allowed to engage patients in some social features that allows them to compete over some type of engagement. And we were so excited about that feature, and we only asked that among few super users whether they like that feature, and they were very enthusiastic and very positive. And we spent a significant time, and in a couple of sprints, we built this feature, and then we realized this feature was not widely utilized. However, the other feature that was more crucial in other integration with remote monitoring device that has been deprioritized because of we just like the certain feature and we wanted to test it out, and that basically made us unable to deliver customer value. and really focus on things that really didn't matter at the end to our main customer base.
Thank you so much.
You can ask your question, Nataliia.
Hi, I'm Natalie. Thank you so much for this. It's so helpful. My question is, you mentioned all these stakeholders and, not jumping in too fast. As a scientist or a drug developer, how do you need to already have established connections with the hospital or the payer? Or, I mean, how can you be connected to all of these stakeholders and in the clinic and the drug companies and the hospitals and the physicians? Who's the most important, like, first contact, and how do you develop that relationship?
Yeah, Natalie, this is a really great question. I think when we think about the stakeholder analysis, it's really important to understand how the ecosystem looks like and who are the players who will be making decisions and impacted, and who are really experience the problem and in which level. And I think it's very important, very early phase, you might be building the stakeholder journey or customer journey, and you're building all these different documents that help you to better understand the market. And you may engage some of the different stakeholders you're not used to working with on a daily basis into the interviews, or you can also engage them to take surveys or do different market research, even online through Reddit, just to get any additional input when you're really building those personas and customer journey. But when it comes to the engagement, with whom do you engage and who your first champion when it comes to the hospital or system, I think it's like, if it's specific specialty, is really understanding who are those patients, who are those providers who are working with those patients, and really working with them as the first champions that are the first line of potential customers who will adopt your product and customers who experience in that problem. But I think there are a lot of really great tools when it comes to really learning a lot about stakeholders before you actually enter the hospital or facility. But ultimately, then you want to confirm a lot of these assumptions with more interviews, meetings, and conversations.
Christine, you can ask your question.
Okay. Sorry, I had two. One that was generated just from the talk. A quick one. I'm a little bit curious about this small percentage that is breaking into Epic's monopoly. What is it that they're doing that it has at least a few hospitals saying, maybe this is something worth investing in, or perhaps Epic might be building into their product. I'm curious about that. I had to go back to find my larger question that I put in the survey. It's a question about team building, and building a team with rigor, which I've been finding to be a difficult process as someone with a biomedical research background. When you need to bring perhaps software developers, coders, MBAs into the team. They don't necessarily have the same kind of culture where they really value data. They really value evidence. It's more about optics. It's more about the presentation. Do you have any advice with regards to how to find those people? What are some best practices for just ruthlessly saying no to those who can't keep up with the rigor?
Yeah, so I think one question you have specifically on Epic and how companies might approach still being able to compete in this busy space, and how they may approach it. And then also when it comes to the building successful teams, what is really dynamic and how to manage the fine balance between more like business oriented versus like engineers, R&D oriented team members, right? Yeah, so I think when it comes to Epic, it's quite fascinating. I certainly thought when I was in days of the startup that there will be much more EMR records that would take over the market. But again, it really shows, it proves that well understanding the workflow and being as close to the current system and supporting the current adoption is really drives retention. But I think some of the go-to-market and abilities to really think about interviewing customers who use an Epic date on day basis and see what it's not addressing and what are the gaps and what are the current problems Epic is not addressing that could be resolved. And also sometimes see like collaborating even with Epic, potentially if they have any program, understanding things they're not looking to cover, but things they consider as part of the ecosystem, things that need to be resolved. It might be just a consultant. You can sometimes they like double-blinded surveys. You can actually recruit some people who work in some of those EHR, EMR record companies and ask certain questions to help you to better understand what they're focusing on, what they're not, but what type of gaps they may still see in the market. I think also when it comes to that multi-stakeholder analysis, how the decisions are made. So, and why companies use Epic and why they may be wanting to shift and they're not looking to shift, and really understanding maybe specific pricing or product positioning. So I would spend more time with the stakeholders, really understanding what their retentions, their concerns, and products they recently consider and why they haven't adopted those. So you can learn so much from your competitors and players before like even building your solution. And I think when it comes to building the successful teams, that's something I'm also trying to learn better. How do you really build the team that's well aligned and the team that's able to understand and agree on certain vision? But I think a lot of things comes with a certain processes. When it comes to the commercialization, you want to make sure you educate some of your commercialization milestone. You provide a good education about your commercialization milestones to everyone, engineers, your R&D team, and making sure that your R&D team actually spent enough time in the field and learning more about the problem. And sometimes attending some of the calls and conversation with your marketing team and sales, that they have a proper exposure to really understanding the state of business and fully understanding why some of the product and features do not get adopted, do not get prioritized. So I think a lot of aspects, a lot of things come with the stakeholder alignment is really the key to make sure both teams could understand each other and understand each other's priorities and have a clear explanation why we're moving towards this decision. And I think when it comes to your business, it's also like shipping faster. And maybe on another side, you have the regulatory and quality team who may have a certain process, but your MBA or your business development team, I really want to ship things faster because there is an expanding milestones. So also making sure you work on the right timelines that really keep you compliant and making sure you meet all the other aspects of your product roadmap.
Thank you, Nataliia. This has been incredibly insightful. I learned a lot today, and I think others would agree with that. So thank you so much. We truly appreciate you spending the time to talk with us today. And since we're a little bit over time, we're going to just end here. But thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated meeting all of you. Thanks you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Christine. Thank you.